In the small Texas ranch town, where secrets run as deep as the wells, Emily Carter clutches her young son Noah's hand as they hurry down a dusty road. Behind them, the echoes of her in-laws' cruel words still ring in their ears. Blamed for her husband's death and trapped by their influence, Emily has nowhere left to turn. But fate has other plans. Jackson Cole, the wealthy yet reclusive owner of the Double Cross Ranch, drives past them that evening. Something in their broken stance catches his eye, a reflection of his own hidden wounds. What begins as a simple act of kindness will soon challenge everything he's built around himself. Could these three wounded souls find healing in each other when the whole town seems set against them? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emily Carter's fingers traced the jagged edge of the wedding photograph, where Margaret Blackwood's disapproving face had been torn away 6 months ago. The morning light, filtering through the threadbare curtains of their rented cottage, caught the silver frame, casting shadows across Thomas's smiling face. Her late husband, forever frozen in that moment of joy before everything changed. "Mama!" Noah's soft voice drew her from the memory. At 8, he already carried himself with the cautious awareness of someone much older, his father's hazel eyes holding a wisdom no child should need. "Grandmother's car just turned onto our street." Emily quickly tucked the photo into her bedside drawer, her hands steady despite the familiar flutter of fear in her chest. The cottage, barely bigger than some people's garages, had been their home for the past 18 months. Thomas's mother called it charity. Emily called it a prison. "Get your backpack, sweetheart," she said, smoothing her son's unruly dark hair. "We'll go out the back way today." Their morning ritual had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. Emily grabbed her waitress uniform from the hook behind the door, the polyester still smelling of last night's shift at the Rusty Spur diner. The name badge was missing its E, but Mr. Peterson hadn't bothered to replace it in the 3 years she'd worked there. Why would he? The Blackwoods owned half the businesses in town, including the diner, and they made sure everyone knew Emily was lucky to have any job at all. Through the window, she watched Margaret's Mercedes crawl past like a sleek predator, its tinted windows concealing the woman who had once welcomed Emily into the family with open arms. Before Thomas's accident, before the accusations, before... The truth became whatever the Blackwoods declared it to be. "They said Daddy's death was your fault again," Noah whispered as they slipped through the back gate, taking the long way around to avoid being seen. "At school yesterday, Tommy Blackwood told everyone you were driving the truck when it happened." Emily's heart clenched. She'd tried so hard to shield Noah from the whispers, but in a town this small, gossip had a way of seeping through every crack. "Your father was alone that night, Noah. He was tired, and the road was dark. Sometimes," she swallowed hard, "sometimes accidents just happen, no matter how much we wish they didn't." What she didn't say was how Thomas had been working double shifts at the ranch, trying to prove himself to his father. How she'd begged him to come home, to rest. How his father had called him weak for even considering it. The truth was, a luxury the Blackwoods had stripped from her, along with everything else. They cut through Old Man Jenkins' orchard, the morning dew soaking their shoes. Noah's small hand, it felt warm in hers, his grip tight as they emerged onto Creek Road. The school bus would be waiting at the corner, and Emily would walk the extra mile to work, rather than risk driving past the Blackwood estate in her rusty Corolla. "I miss him," Noah said suddenly, stopping beneath a gnarled apple tree. "But sometimes I think I'm forgetting what his voice sounded like." Emily knelt before him, the wet grass seeping through her uniform pants. "Your daddy loved you more than anything in this world, Noah, and he'd be so proud of how brave you are." She pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. "We're going to be okay." But even as she spoke the words, Margaret's Mercedes appeared at the far end of Creek Road. Emily's heart thundered as she quickly steered Noah behind the tree. They watched in silence as the car slowed, its window rolling down with mechanical precision. Emily? Margaret's voice carried across the distance, cold as winter frost. The family's having dinner tonight. Noah should be there. His cousins miss him. The invitation was a command, wrapped in the pretense of familial duty. Emily felt Noah trembling against her side. We have plans tonight, Margaret. Maybe another time. The Mercedes idled, its engine purring with quiet menace. Thomas would have wanted his son to know his family, or are you trying to make him forget where he comes from, just like you made? Thomas forget his responsibilities that night? Emily stood her ground, though her knees felt weak. We both know what really happened that night, Margaret, and so does your husband. The mention of Richard Blackwood made Margaret's perfectly painted lips twist. Without another word, she rolled up her window and drove away, leaving behind only the acrid smell of exhaust and fear. Noah's bus appeared at the corner, its yellow bulk a welcome sight. Emily straightened his collar, forcing a smile. Have a good day at school, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? He nodded solemnly. Head down, stay quiet, and if Uncle Richard comes to school again, go straight to Mrs. Martinez's office, Emily finished. The school secretary was one of the few people in town who hadn't turned their back on them, though Emily knew it cost the woman dearly in social currency. As she watched Noah climb onto the bus, Emily touched the worn locket at her throat, her last gift from Thomas. Inside was a tiny photo of the three of them, taken at the county fair just weeks before the accident. They were laughing, unaware that their happiness had an expiration date. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another scorching Texas day. Emily began her walk to the diner, her uniform already sticking to her back. She had 8 hours of coffee refills and sympathetic glances ahead of her, followed by another evening of watching shadows lengthen across their cottage walls, jumping at every sound that might herald another Blackwood visit. But for now, Noah was safe on that bus, and she was still standing. Some days that had to be enough. The emergency room discharge papers trembled in Emily's hands as she sat in her Corolla, parked behind the diner after closing. Patient presence with contusions to right side of face, bruised ribs. She couldn't read further. Her good eye, already swelling shut. The other papers, the ones declaring she'd fallen downstairs, felt like one more betrayal from a town that had turned its back on her. 6 hours earlier, she'd been clearing tables when Richard Blackwood's heavy frame filled the diner's doorway. The lunch rush had just ended, and Emily's heart sank as she saw Tommy and Noah huddled by the kitchen, her son's face streaked with tears. Your boy here got into a fight with my grandson, Richard's voice carried across the empty diner. Seems he's been spreading lies about his father's death. Mr. Peterson emerged from the kitchen, wringing his dish towel. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps we could stay out of family business, Jim. Richard's tone left no room for argument. The diner owner retreated, leaving Emily alone with her father-in-law. Noah, go wait in Mrs. Martinez's office, Emily said quietly. But Richard's hand shot out, gripping her son's shoulder. The boy stays. He needs to learn about respect, about family loyalty. Richard's fingers dug deeper, making Noah wince. Tell your mother what you said, boy. Noah's voice quavered. I only told Tommy what I heard about Grandpa making Dad work that night, about the phone call. The slap came without warning, catching Emily across the face as she lunged to shield Noah. She tasted blood as she stumbled against a table, but managed to push Noah toward the kitchen. Run! What followed was a blur of pain and harsh words. Richard's rage, always simmering beneath the surface, exploded. Emily remembered hitting the floor, the cold linoleum against her cheek. She remembered Tommy's frightened face as he watched. His grandfather and Mr. Peterson's cowardly silence from the kitchen. But most clearly, she remembered Noah's voice, screaming for help as he ran into the street. It was Mrs. Martinez who finally arrived, who called the ambulance despite Richard's protests, who held Noah while the paramedics examined Emily. Now, hours later, Emily touched the hospital band on her wrist. The medicine they'd given her made everything feel distant, dreamlike. But Noah's fears were sharp and real in the back seat. "They'll come to the house," he whispered, clutching his backpack. "Grandmother always comes after grandfather gets angry." Emily met his eyes in the rearview mirror, seeing Thomas in every feature of his young face. The face that was watching her, waiting for her to make things right, waiting for his mother to be strong enough, smart enough, brave enough to save them both. She started the car, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. The cottage would be watched. It always was after an incident, but she had $300 saved in a coffee can, hidden beneath the loose floorboard under Noah's bed. The Corolla had a full tank of gas, and most importantly, she had nothing left to lose. "We're not going home, sweetheart," she said, pulling out of the diner's parking lot. "We're going to take a little trip." Noah's eyes widened with understanding. In his 8 years, he'd grown far too familiar with the concept of escape. But where? Emily headed east, away from the setting sun that painted their town in deceptively gentle colors. Away from the Blackwood's sprawling estate and their web of influence. She had no destination in mind, only the desperate need to put distance between her son and the people who would destroy him to maintain their lies. "Somewhere new," she promised, pressing the gas pedal harder as they passed the town limits. Her ribs screamed in protest with each breath, but the pain felt clarifying. "Somewhere they can't find us." As the familiar buildings fell away behind them, Emily caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back was battered but not broken. Thomas had loved that about her, her quiet, stubborn strength. It was time to prove she still had it. The road ahead stretched into darkness, empty and uncertain. But for the first time in 18 months, Emily felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. Jackson Cole held the yellow deed to the Double Cross Ranch in calloused hands, studying his grandfather's bold signature at the bottom of the page. 4 generations of Coles had worked this land, their stories written in fence posts and cattle. Brands in the old barn's weathered beams and the deep well that had never run dry. Now it was just him, rattling around in the big house like the ghost some folks in town already thought he was. The setting sun painted his office in amber light, catching the silver in his temples. At 45, Jackson wore his solitude like a well-broken saddle, comfortable, familiar, earned. The ranch hands knew to leave him be after 6 unless something was dying or on fire. Usually, this was his time to review contracts or plan the next day's work. But tonight, something felt unsettled in his bones. Movement on the property's eastern access road caught his eye. His first thought was rustlers. It had been a bad year for cattle theft, but the figures were too small, too uncertain in their steps. He reached for the binoculars he kept by the window, a woman and child making their way past his property line. Even from this distance, he could see the woman was hurt, her gait irregular, protective. The boy stayed close to her side, constantly, looking back over his shoulder like he expected pursuit. Jackson's jaw tightened as he noted her swollen face, the way she cradled her ribs. He'd seen enough working cattle to recognize injuries that came from something meaner than a fall. The deed crinkled in his grip as old memories surfaced. His mother's hushed tears late at night, his father's bourbon-fueled rages, the way the neighbors had always found somewhere else to look, until the night Jackson, at 17, had finally stood his ground. The night that had ended with his father leaving for good, and Jackson learning that sometimes silence was the costliest choice of all. He set the deed aside and grabbed his truck keys. The ranch's security cameras would have caught the pair crossing onto his land. Most owners would have called the sheriff, but Jackson had learned young that law enforcement didn't always mean justice. His boots echoed on the hardwood floors as he made his way downstairs. The house felt especially empty tonight. Its 14 rooms, filled with furniture draped in dust covers and memories he tried not to disturb. Only the kitchen and his bedroom showed signs of life. The rest preserved like a museum to a family that had slowly dwindled to one. The ranch's gravel roads were already cooling as Jackson's truck wound through the property. He kept his speed, unhurried, lights off, not wanting to spook them. The woman and boy had covered surprising ground, nearly reaching the old creek crossing where the road forked toward town. He saw the moment they noticed his approach, the way they pressed themselves against the barbed wire fence, as if trying to disappear into the gathering shadows. The boy moved in front of his mother, small fists clenched. The protectiveness of the gesture made something in Jackson's chest ache. He stopped the truck 30 feet away and stepped out slowly, keeping his hands visible. Up close, the woman's injuries were worse than he'd thought. Her left eye was swollen shut, and dried blood darkened the collar of her waitress uniform. Despite this, she met his gaze steadily, positioning herself between him and the child. "Evening," Jackson said, his voice rough from disuse. "Creek's rising with the spring melt. Bridge ahead isn't safe after dark." The woman's good eye darted between him and the road behind them. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse but determined. "We appreciate the warning. We'll find another way." Jackson recognized the desperation in her tone, the sound of someone who'd run out of options, but couldn't afford to stop running. He'd heard it in his mother's voice, that last night, before she'd taken him and fled to his grandfather's ranch, before the double cross had become their sanctuary. "Got a guest house," he said carefully, giving them plenty of space. "Private. Separate drive. No one would know you're there." He paused, then added, "No questions asked." The boy tugged at his mother's hand, whispering something Jackson couldn't hear. She studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against what must have been a lifetime of broken promises and betrayed trust. Finally, she asked, "Why?" Jackson looked past them to where the sun was slipping behind his grandfather's old barn, remembering another twilight 30 years ago, when an old rancher had opened his door to a frightened woman and her angry son. "Because someone once did." "The same for me," he said simply, "and because some things aren't meant to be witnessed in silence." The guest house keys felt heavy in Emily's palm, their brass surface catching the porch light's glow. 2 keys on a worn leather fob, marked with a simple brass plate reading "Double Cross Ranch, Esther 1889. Such a small thing to represent such an enormous leap of faith. She watched through the window as Jackson Cole's truck disappeared around the bend, heading back to the main house. He'd shown them the basics: lights, heating, the fully stocked kitchen, then left them alone, understanding instinctively that space was as important as shelter right now. "Mama," Noah whispered, pressed against her side. "There's a horse. In the paddock. Right there." His voice held a wonder she hadn't heard in months, maybe years. The guest house was larger than their cottage, with 2 bedrooms and a stone fireplace. Everything smelled of cedar and leather, from the exposed beams to the handmade quilts folded at the foot of each bed. Emily's trained eye caught the fresh towels in the bathroom, the new toothbrushes still in their packages, the first aid kit prominently placed on the kitchen counter. Their host had thought of everything, while pretending to think of nothing at all. She urged Noah toward the bathroom. "Let's get you cleaned up for bed, sweetheart." The events of the day were catching up with her, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through her ribs. But Noah needed her steady right now. As she helped him wash up, she caught their reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was a roadmap of Richard Blackwood's rage, but Noah's eyes held something new. Not fear for once, but curiosity. He couldn't stop glancing out the windows at the ranch beyond. "Do you think Mr. Cole was telling the truth?" Noah asked, as she tucked him into bed. "About his mom running away, too?" Emily sat carefully on the edge of his bed, touching the cool compress Jackson had left for her eye. "I think sometimes people recognize in others what they've been through themselves." "He has kind eyes," Noah said thoughtfully, "like Dad's, but sadder." The observation startled her. Noah rarely spoke about Thomas's features, as if holding those memories too close might wear them away. She smoothed his hair back, buying time, to steady her voice. "Try to sleep, sweetheart. We're safe here tonight." Once Noah's breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep, Emily forced herself to check the doors and windows, testing locks that looked solid enough to withstand a siege. Through the kitchen window, she could see lights on in the main house, a warm glow against the Texas night. A soft knock at the back door made her jump. Jackson Cole stood on the porch, holding a tray and keeping his distance from the window, giving her space to refuse if she needed to. Emily hesitated, then opened the door. Up close, she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sun and solitude. He wore his strength quietly, nothing, like Richard's bullying bulk or Thomas's nervous energy. "Thought you might need these," he said, offering the tray. Steam rose from a mug of tea, and beside it sat several ice packs and bottles of pain medication. "Got some stronger stuff if you need it. Had a horse kick me last spring. The good pills are what got me through." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Emily took the tray, careful to avoid his fingers. "Why are you doing all this?" Jackson leaned against the porch rail, keeping the width of the doorway between them. His eyes traveled to her injuries, then away, respecting her dignity. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. "Man who taught me that left me this ranch and a promise to honor it. The Blackwoods have influence everywhere," Emily warned. "They'll look for us. Let them." Something hardened in his face. "I've dealt with worse than small-town bullies who think money equals power." Emily studied him, this stranger who offered sanctuary with no strings attached. "I can't pay you. Not much anyway. Don't want your money," he straightened, adjusting his hat. "Place has been too quiet since my grandfather passed. Could use some life in it again." He turned to go, then paused. Noticed the boy looking at the horses. "Got a gentle mare named Sugar might suit him if he's interested. Sometimes healing comes easier on horseback." After he left, Emily stood at the window for a long time, watching the lights in his house and holding the keys he'd given them. The brass plate caught the lamplight, and she ran her thumb over the engraved date. 1889. How many secrets had this ranch kept? How many refugees had found shelter in this guest house under the wide Texas sky? She sipped the tea, chamomile with honey, exactly what her grandmother used to make, and felt something inside her begin to unknot. Not trust, not yet, but maybe its quiet, cautious cousin, hope. The yellowed newspaper clipping trembled in Jackson's weathered hands as he sat in his grandfather's old leather chair. "Local rancher found dead after domestic dispute," the headline read. July 15th, 1995, the story of his father's last night alive, sanitized for public consumption, the truth buried as deep as the man himself. Morning light streamed through his office window, catching dust motes and memories. He'd found Emily in the garden at dawn, trying to avoid her reflection in the windows. Her bruises had deepened overnight into stark purples and yellows, but she stood straighter today. Noah was out by the paddock, watching Sugar with the kind of longing only a child could muster. The phone on his desk rang, shattering the quiet. Martha Chen from the feed store, her voice tight with warning. "Jackson, Richard Blackwood's been asking questions about whether anyone's seen his daughter-in-law." Jackson's jaw clenched. "Appreciate the heads up, Martha. That woman at the diner." Martha hesitated. "Sheriff Jenkins says she fell, but my Tommy saw different. Said it reminded him of my mother." Jackson finished quietly. "Yeah, I know." After hanging up, Jackson walked to the window. Emily had moved to the paddock, one arm wrapped protectively around her ribs as she watched Noah reach out to Sugar. The mare's gentle brown eyes and soft nose worked their magic, drawing a smile from the boy, the first Jackson had seen. The scene overlapped with another memory, himself at 12, finding solace in the horses after his father's rages, his grandfather teaching him that true strength had nothing to do with fists or fear. A knock at his office door pulled him back to the present. Emily stood in the doorway, her good eye taking in the room's details, the old photos, the ranch ledgers, the life built on second chances. "Noah's never seen horses up close before," she said. "Just in pictures." Jackson gestured to a chair, moving slowly. He'd noticed how sudden movements made her tense. Sugar was my mother's horse, gentlest creature on 4 legs. Emily sat carefully, favoring her right side. Her gaze fell on the newspaper clipping he hadn't put away. He saw recognition flash across her face, not of the story itself, but of its kind. The way trauma recognized trauma. "The Blackwoods aren't the only ones with history in this town," Jackson said quietly. "My father was a respected rancher. Pillars of the community types don't beat their wives, according to the good folks around here. So nobody saw anything, year after year, until the night he finally went too far." Emily's hands twisted in her lap. "What happened?" "I was 17. Came home early from a rodeo competition. Found him standing over my mother with his belt." Jackson's voice remained steady, the story worn smooth like a river rock. "Something in me just broke. We fought. He pulled his gun. In the struggle—" He gestured to the article. "The official story says he was drunk and fell, shot himself by accident. And the unofficial story? Stayed buried, along with a lot of other things." Jackson met her eyes. "Town's got a long memory for the wrong things, and selective amnesia. For the rest, Sheriff Jenkins is Richard Blackwood's hunting buddy. Mayor Davis owes the family money, and everybody's got something to lose if they step out of line." Emily's face hardened. "You're saying we should run further. I'm saying I understand why you ran." Jackson stood, walking to a photo of his grandfather on the wall. "But running isn't always the answer. Sometimes you have to plant your feet and fight, not with fists, with truth." "Truth?" Emily's laugh held no humor. "The truth died with Thomas. Nobody wants to hear how Richard worked him to exhaustion, how that truck went off the road because his father wouldn't let him rest. Nobody cares." "That—" She stopped, pressing her fingers to her lips. "That what?" Jackson asked softly. Through the window, they could hear Noah's delighted laugh as Sugar nuzzled his palm. Emily watched her son, tears gathering in her good eye. That Richard was the last person to talk to Thomas that night. That the call lasted 10 minutes, and when it ended, Thomas was crying. An hour later, he was dead. Her voice broke. "I tried to tell the police, but the phone records disappeared, and then the accusations started, that I was an unfit mother, that I was unstable, that I'd somehow caused the accident myself." Jackson touched the newspaper clipping, feeling its brittle edges. "Records have a way of vanishing in this town, but people remember, they whisper, and sometimes—" He pulled open his desk drawer, removing a small tape recorder. "Sometimes they leave evidence, thinking nobody's paying attention." Emily stared at the recorder, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You've been gathering proof. 30 years. Worth, against the Blackwoods and others like them." Jackson's voice hardened. "My grandfather taught me that evil grows best in silence, so I learned to listen, to wait, to build a case that even Sheriff Jenkins can't ignore." Outside, Noah had found the courage to stroke Sugar's neck, his small face alight with joy. Emily watched him, tears falling freely now. "We can't fight them alone," she whispered. "No," Jackson agreed, "but maybe we don't have to." Noah's colored pencil moved across the paper with careful precision, adding the final touches to his drawing. The ranch house stood proud in the background, its windows glowing yellow against a purple crayon sunset. In the foreground, 3 figures stood by the paddock fence. A tall man in a cowboy hat, a woman with long dark hair, and a small boy sitting atop Sugar, whose brown coat Noah had spent extra time getting just right. Emily watched from the guest house kitchen as her son worked. At the coffee table, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. 2 weeks had passed since their arrival at Double Cross Ranch, and signs of healing showed in more than just her fading bruises. The morning routine that had once been a dance of fear had transformed into something almost peaceful. Noah no longer startled at unexpected sounds. The shadows under his eyes had softened, and yesterday she'd heard him laugh, really laugh, as Jackson taught him how to feed sugar carrots from a flat palm. "He's got talent." Jackson's quiet voice came from the doorway, making her jump slightly. He'd learned to scuff his boots on the porch, announcing his presence before appearing. These small considerations spoke volumes. "Sorry to interrupt," he continued, holding up a thermos. "Thought you might want some coffee, made too much again." It had become their morning ritual, this pretense of excess coffee that needed sharing. Emily accepted the thermos, inhaling the rich aroma. Like everything else about Jackson Cole, even his coffee was straightforward and honest. "Sugar's saddled up," he said, careful to direct his words so Noah could hear. "Thought the boy might want his second lesson, if his mama approves." Noah's head shot up, hope blazing across his face. The drawing forgotten, he looked to Emily with pleading eyes. "Please, Mama. I've been practicing my sitting straight just like Mr. Cole showed me." Emily hesitated. The bruises on her ribs had faded enough that she could watch without wincing as Jackson helped Noah mount the gentle mare. But letting her son out of sight, even here, old fears died hard. "I'll be with him every second," Jackson promised, reading her concern. "Got some new techniques to show him. Teaching him right means teaching him safe." Noah bounced to his feet, drawing in hand. "Look what I made. It's all of us. And sugar, too." He thrust the paper toward Jackson, then froze, suddenly shy. Jackson took the drawing with calloused hands, studying it with the same serious attention he gave his ranch ledgers. "Well now, you've captured Sugar's spirit perfectly. See how you got that kind look in her eye?" His finger traced the careful lines. "And your mama's smile. That's good work, son." Emily's heart caught at the word son, so naturally spoken. Noah beamed, fear of rejection forgotten. "Can I show Sugar?" "Get your boots on first," Emily said, surprising herself with the permission. Noah raced to his room, drawing clutched carefully in one hand. Alone in the kitchen, Emily studied Jackson's profile as he watched Noah go. The morning sun through the window caught the silver in his hair, the tiny crow's feet near his eyes that deepened when he smiled. She'd learned to read those eyes over the past weeks, their steadiness, their quiet understanding, their flashes of carefully controlled anger when he thought she wasn't looking. "Martha called from town," he said finally, his voice low. "Blackwoods have been asking questions at the feed store, the diner, even the school." Emily's hands tightened around the thermos. "They won't stop looking." "No," Jackson agreed, "but they're looking in the wrong places. Nobody in town knows about this guest house. My grandfather made sure it wasn't on any property maps, and I've got friends in the county records office keeping an eye out." The sound of Noah's boots clomping down the hall interrupted them. Jackson stepped back, maintaining the careful distance he always kept. But something in Emily's chest ached at the space between them. "Thank you," she said softly, "for all of this." Jackson touched the brim of his hat, a gesture she'd come to recognize as acknowledgement of things too complex for words. "Boy's got a good eye," he said, nodding toward the drawing Noah had left on the table. "Sees things clear." Emily looked at the picture, the three figures by the fence, standing close together like a family, like something whole and unbroken. "Yes," she whispered, "he does." The legal notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, its certified mail sticker, gleaming like a warning sign against the manila envelope. Emily's hands shook as she read the formal language. "Emergency petition for temporary custody. Grave concerns for the minor child's safety. History of mental instability. Flight risk." Jackson found her at the kitchen table, the papers spread out before her like a minefield. One look at her face had him closing the guest house door. "And pulling out a chair, they found us," Emily whispered. "Someone must have seen Noah during the riding lesson yesterday when we went to the far pasture." "Tell me," Jackson said quietly, his hand resting near hers on the table. "Not touching, but close enough to steady. They're saying I'm unstable. That running proves it. They've got statements from concerned citizens about my erratic behavior, my violent outbursts." Her laugh held no humor. "They're using Richard's attack against me, saying I started it, that I endangered Noah by involving him." Jackson reached for the papers, his jaw tightening as he read. Years of handling ranch contracts had taught him to find poison hidden in legal language. "Hearing set for Friday. Judge Harrison's court. You know him. Plays poker with Richard every Thursday at the country club. Jackson's voice was carefully neutral. But he's also up for re-election this year, and he's got a daughter who writes for the Austin newspaper. A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Noah stood there in his pajamas, clutching his drawing from yesterday. The paper was crumpled as if he'd been holding it like a lifeline. "Are they going to take me away?" His voice was small, but his eyes held the terrible wisdom of children who've learned too young about adult betrayals. Emily started to rise, but her legs wouldn't hold her. It was Jackson who moved, kneeling before Noah with the same gentle certainty he used with spooked horses. "Nobody's taking you anywhere, son," he said firmly. "Your mama and I won't let that happen. But grandmother says—" "Folks say a lot of things," Jackson interrupted, his voice gentle but brooking no argument. "Doesn't make them true. Remember what I taught you about Sugar, how you have to prove yourself trustworthy before she'll trust you." He waited for Noah's nod. "Well, same goes for people. Your grandmother and grandfather, they broke that trust. They don't get to make decisions about you anymore." Noah's fingers worked the edge of his drawing. "They'll come here, like they always do. Let them come." Jackson's tone made Emily look up sharply. She recognized the steel beneath the quiet words, the same resolve she'd heard when he spoke of his father. "This is coal land. Has been since before your grandparents were born, and coals protect their own." The simple declaration hung in the morning air. Emily felt something shift in her chest, not quite hope, but its more stubborn cousin, determination. She found her feet, moving to kneel beside Jackson. "Noah, remember the story about the 3 little pigs? How the 3rd pig built his house? So strong that the wolf couldn't blow it down?" Noah nodded, some of the fear leaving his face. "The brick house." "That's right. Well, we're in our brick house now. And Mr. Cole," she met Jackson's eyes, saw the promise there. "Jackson is helping us make it even stronger." A truck's engine rumbled outside. Cal, the ranch foreman, arriving for the morning feed run. The familiar sound seemed to settle Noah. Normal things still happened even when the world tilted sideways. "Can I help feed Sugar?" he asked. The papers on the table momentarily forgotten in the way only children could manage. "Go get dressed first," Emily said. As Noah ran to his room, she turned to Jackson. "I can't ask you to fight this battle. The Blackwoods, you're not asking." Jackson stood, offering her a hand up. The brief contact sent warmth through her palm. "Been waiting 20 years to show this town that money and fear aren't the same. As right and wrong. Maybe it's time they learned the difference." He moved to the window, watching Cal's truck kick up dust on the drive. "Made some calls last night. Got a friend in Austin, retired judge who owes my grandfather a favor. She knows every legal trick the Blackwoods might try. And if legal isn't enough," Jackson's eyes hardened, "then we fight other ways. Truth's got a way of coming out, Emily. Sometimes it just needs the right moment, and the right witnesses." The morning sun caught the gold lettering on the legal notice, making it shine like fool's gold. Emily touched Noah's drawing, still lying on the table, their 3 figures standing together, strong and unafraid. "Okay," she said quietly, "then we fight." The security camera footage played silently on Jackson's office computer, its black and white clarity capturing the scene unfolding at his front gate. 3 vehicles, Richard Blackwood's Lincoln Navigator, Margaret's Mercedes, and Sheriff Jenkins' patrol car, stirred up dust clouds in the late afternoon sun. Even without audio, their arrival carried the weight of threatened violence. Emily stood behind Jackson's chair, one hand gripping the leather backrest. "They brought the sheriff. They brought a hunting buddy with a badge," Jackson corrected, his voice steady despite the muscle working in his jaw. "Different thing entirely. They watched Richard step out first, his bulk made more imposing by a tailored suit that probably cost more than most ranch hands made in a month. Margaret emerged next, elegant as ever in her pearls and pressed slacks. Sheriff Jenkins hung back, trying to look official while avoiding eye contact with the security camera he surely knew was there. "Noah's safe?" Jackson asked, though he already knew the answer. They'd prepared for this, with Cal and Sarah at the back pasture. "Sarah's got her phone recording everything," Emily's voice caught. He was so brave, acting like it was just another riding lesson. Jackson stood, adjusting his hat. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting others stand guard for a while. He touched her arm briefly. Stay here. Watch the feeds. If anything feels wrong, call Judge Martinez and hit the panic button you installed, I remember. She caught his sleeve as he turned to go. Jackson, they're not here to talk. No, he agreed softly. They're here to intimidate, to remind everyone that Blackwood money makes the rules. A grim smile touched his lips. Might be time they learned about older rules, ones written in dirt and blood and backbone. Emily watched him stride out, his shoulders set with the same quiet strength that had held this ranch together through drought and disaster. Through the window, she saw him stop at his truck, removing something from behind the seat, the security. Veed showed Richard already halfway to the house, Margaret and the sheriff trailing in his wake. Their path would take them right past the old oak where Jackson now stood, his grandfather's shotgun held casually in the crook of his arm. That's far enough, Jackson's voice carried clearly through the office window. This is private property. Richard's laugh boomed across the yard. Private property. Boy, I was buying and selling ranches while you were still playing cowboy in your granddaddy's hat. Might be, Jackson agreed mildly. But right now you're trespassing on coal land, and we both know what that means in Texas. Sheriff Jenkins stepped forward, one hand resting meaningfully on his holster. Now, Jackson, let's not do anything rash. We're here on official business. Got reports of a missing woman and child. Missing? Jackson's voice could have frozen hell. Funny word for hiding from abuse. But then, you'd know all about that, wouldn't you, Sheriff, being such good friends with the Blackwoods and all? Margaret's perfectly controlled voice cut through the tension. We're here for Noah. A child needs his family. Family. The word cracked like a whip, like the family that put his mother in the emergency room, that taught him to flinch at loud noises, to check every room for escape routes. Richard took another step forward, stopping when Jackson smoothly brought the shotgun to rest against his shoulder, not pointing, but ready. You're interfering with a court order, Richard growled. We have rights. Rights? Jackson's laugh held no humor. Let's talk about rights. Right to safety, right to peace, right to not live in fear of the next fist or belt or drunken rage. His voice dropped lower. You want to talk about rights, Richard? Let's talk about the right to defend against threats on private property. Texas law's real clear on that one. The security feed caught Margaret's slight step backward, the first crack in her perfect facade. Sheriff Jenkins looked increasingly uncertain, his hand dropping from his holster. Think carefully, Jackson continued, quiet as a rattler's warning, about the story you want in tomorrow's papers. Wealthy family storms ranch, threatens violence. My friend at the Austin Chronicle would love that one, might even run it next. To that piece about the judge's re-election campaign, Richard's face purpled. You threatening me, boy? No, sir. Making you a promise. Same one my grandfather made your daddy 30 years ago when he tried to force us to sell. Jackson's voice carried the weight of generations. This land holds its own, and so do the people on it. Through the window, Emily watched Richard's hands clench and release. For a moment she thought he would charge forward, court order be damned. But Margaret's hand on his arm held him back. This isn't over, Richard spat. No, Jackson agreed, but it's over for today. And tomorrow? His smile was wolf-sharp in the fading light. Tomorrow we start playing by different rules, ones even. Blackwood money can't buy. Emily watched them retreat, their dignity as dusty as their expensive shoes. When Jackson finally lowered the shotgun, she saw his hands shake slightly, not with fear, but with the effort of contained rage. The security footage caught their final exit, 3 vehicles kicking up dust like they were trying to outrun the truth itself. Emily touched the screen where Jackson stood, straight-backed and resolute, still guarding his land. Their land, now. Whether any of them had planned it that way or not. The letter lay unfinished on Emily's bedside table, moonlight catching the tear-smudged ink. "Dear Thomas," it began, then stopped, started again, each attempt to find the right words crossed out until the paper looked like a battlefield of emotions. Sleep eluded her tonight. The confrontation with the Blackwoods had stirred up too many memories, too many what-ifs. From her window in the guest house, she could see lights still burning in Jackson's study. He'd been up there for hours, making calls, pulling strings, building walls of paper and influence around them. Noah slept peacefully for the first time in days, his dreams untroubled by the afternoon's drama. He'd returned from his riding lesson, with Sarah full of stories about the new foal in the back pasture, his trust in Jackson's protection absolute. Children were resilient that way. They knew instinctively who they could count on. Emily picked up the letter again, her fingers tracing the words she'd managed to write. "I've been angry with you for so long, for leaving us, for not being strong enough to stand up to your father, for making me promise to stay close to your family, to give Noah his grandparents, when you must have known what they were capable of." A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Jackson stood there, his expression gentle in the dim light. "Saw your light on. Thought you might want some tea." It had become their ritual, these late-night conversations over chamomile and honey. Emily wrapped her robe tighter and followed him to the kitchen, where 2 mugs already steamed. On the counter, "Noah asked me something today," Jackson said, sliding her mug closer. "While you were watching the security feeds, asked if he could call me Uncle Jack." His voice held a question. Emily's hands tightened around the warm ceramic. "What did you tell him?" "Said I'd be honored, but that it was up to his mama." Jackson studied his own mug. "Boy needs good men in his life, men who show him there's more to strength than making others feel small." The letter's unfinished words echoed in Emily's mind. She thought of Thomas, always trying to prove himself to a father who saw kindness as weakness, always apologizing for existing until the apologies became a habit neither of them could break. "I never told anyone this," she said quietly, "but the night Thomas died, when Richard called him back to the ranch, I heard part of the conversation. Richard was raging about Thomas wanting to move us away, to start fresh somewhere else, called him ungrateful, worthless." Her voice caught. "Thomas was crying when he hung up, but he went anyway. Always went when his father called." Jackson's hand moved across the counter, not quite touching hers. "My father used to say a man's worth was measured by how many people feared him. Took me years to unlearn that poison. And now?" Emily looked up, meeting his eyes. "What's a man's worth measured by?" "By how many people feel safe in his presence," Jackson answered without hesitation. "By whether he uses his strength to protect or to control." He smiled slightly. "My grandfather taught me that, along with everything else about this ranch." Emily thought of the shotgun, how Jackson had held it today, not as a threat, but as a boundary. How different it was from Richard's way of wielding power. "I've been trying to write to Thomas," she admitted, gesturing toward her room. "To let go of some things, but the words keep coming out wrong." "Sometimes words aren't enough," Jackson said. "Sometimes you have to live your way into forgiveness, or out of it." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You know, Noah's got his father's eyes, but his strength, that quiet, stubborn dignity, that's all you." The simple observation undid her. Tears she'd been holding back all day spilled over, but they felt different from the ones that had stained the letter, cleansing somehow. Jackson moved slowly, telegraphing his intentions before drawing her into a gentle embrace. Emily stiffened. For a moment, it had been so long since she'd been held without fear, then melted into the comfort he offered. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "Both of you." They stood like that for a long moment, the night wrapping around them. Like a blanket. Through the window, Emily could see the stars scattered across the Texas sky, bright and unwavering, like hope, like promises kept. Later, she would return to her room and find new words for her letter, not about anger or regret, but about forgiveness, about learning that love shouldn't require sacrifice, about finding strength in unexpected places and family in uncharted hearts. But for now, she let herself be held, knowing that sometimes the most important words were the ones that didn't need speaking at all. The court summons felt heavy in Emily's hands as she sat in Judge Martinez's Austin office, its official seal gleaming like a warning. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing, studied the stack of documents spread across her desk. Richard Blackwood's not just filing for emergency custody, Martinez said, tapping a highlighted paragraph. He's pushing for a competency hearing, trying to paint you as mentally unstable, using your departure as evidence of erratic behavior. Her lips thinned. It's a classic abuser's tactic. Gaslight, isolate, then use the victim's protective instincts against them. Jackson sat beside Emily, his presence solid and reassuring. He'd dressed for the meeting in a crisp white shirt and dark blazer, though he'd refused to remove his Stetson. Some boundaries, he'd said with a faint smile, weren't meant to be crossed. "They're calling witnesses," Emily said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Dr. Phillips, who treated me after Richard's attack, Mr. Peterson from the diner, even Noah's teacher. All people who depend on Blackwood money or influence," Jackson added. "They're building a narrative of Emily as unstable, violent, trying to flip the script." Judge Martinez nodded, her expression grim. "Small towns run on whispers and favors, but they also run on secrets." She pulled out another document, a sealed file with the county court stamp. "Your friend Martha. Jen called my office yesterday. Seems she's been keeping a diary for years. Names, dates, incidents involving the Blackwoods that never made it into official reports." Hope flickered in Emily's chest. Will it be enough by itself? No. But combined with the hospital records Jackson's been collecting, the security footage from the ranch, and the testimonies I'm gathering from other victims who finally agreed to speak. Martinez's smile was sharp as a blade. Let's just say Richard Blackwood's not the only one who knows how to build a case. A knock at the door interrupted them. Martinez's secretary entered with a fresh stack of papers. "Judge Harrison's clerk just called. They're moving up the hearing tomorrow morning." Emily's heart stuttered. "Tomorrow? But we're not ready." "That's the point," Jackson said quietly. "They're trying to rush this through before we can organize our defense." He turned to Martinez. "Can they do that?" The judge was already reaching in for her phone. "They can try, but they forgot something important." She punched in a number, her smile growing. "I've got 30 years of favors owed, and I'm not above calling them in. Give me an hour." While Martinez made her calls, Emily walked to the window. Austin sprawled below, its streets and buildings so different from the small town that had become both refuge and prison. Behind her, she heard Jackson speaking quietly with the judge's secretary, his voice carrying that same steady certainty that had faced down Richard Blackwood at the ranch. "Got it," Martinez announced, hanging up. "Hearings stayed until next week. And I've got Judge Harrison's daughter, the reporter, interested in doing a piece on domestic violence in small towns. Seems she's particularly curious about how local power structures enable abuse." Jackson moved to stand beside Emily at the window. "Richard won't take this lying down." "No," Martinez agreed. "Expect them to escalate. They might try to serve an emergency removal order, use law enforcement to take Noah before the hearing." Emily's fingers pressed against the cool glass. They can't remove him from Cole property without a federal warrant," Jackson interrupted. "Ranch has been in my family since before Texas was a state. Different laws apply." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Emily, there's something we need to consider. A way to make it harder for them to separate you and Noah." Martinez caught his meaning first. "Marriage of convenience," she said, nodding. "Old legal principle would give Emily immediate property rights as a Cole, make it nearly impossible for the Blackwoods to execute any removal without federal intervention." Emily turned from the window, studying Jackson's face. "You do that." His eyes met hers, gentle but intense. "To protect you and Noah? in a heartbeat. But only if you want it. Only if... Yes, Emily said softly, surprising herself with the lack of hesitation in her voice. Not just for protection. Something shifted in Jackson's expression. Hope mingled with a deeper emotion he couldn't quite hide. Martinez tactfully became very interested in her paperwork. "Well then," the judge said briskly, pulling out a new form. "Let's give Richard Blackwood something new to chew on. I can have the license ready within the hour. The ranch's property status combined with a legal marriage would create quite the jurisdictional nightmare for our friends at the county court." Emily felt Jackson's hand find hers, warm and calloused and sure. Through the window, storm clouds gathered over Austin, promising rain. But for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something else gathering too. Strength, certainty, and the fierce joy of choosing her own path. The court summons still lay on Martinez's desk, but its power seemed diminished now. Just paper and ink, trying to cage something that had already taken flight. The original police report from the night of Thomas's death lay on Jackson's desk, its faded type and coffee stains belying its explosive contents. Martha Chen's brother-in-law, a retired county clerk, had found it misfiled in the basement archives, accidentally on purpose, as things often were when the Blackwoods wanted them hidden. "Read that part again," Emily said, her finger tracing. A paragraph that changed everything. Jackson's study had become their war room, its walls now covered with timeline charts and connected evidence. "Witness statement from Highway Patrol Officer Dean Morris," Jackson read, his voice tight. "Arrived at scene at 23:47. Victim's vehicle showed signs of intentional damage to brake lines. Evidence of recent tampering." He looked up. "The report was amended 2 days later. All mention of brake tampering disappeared." "Officer Morris died in a hunting accident that same week," Emily whispered. "Everyone said it was tragic. Random. Nothing random about it." Jackson pulled out another document. Bank records showing a large transfer from Richard Blackwood's personal account to an offshore entity. The date matched Morris's death. Richard's been buying silence for years, but he got sloppy this time. Left a trail. Emily sank into the leather chair. Her wedding ring, a simple gold band they'd chosen yesterday, catching the lamplight. Thomas knew something, didn't he? That's why Richard called him back that night. Martha's diary mentions an argument at the ranch that morning. Thomas threatened to go to the SEC about missing funds, irregularities in the family's business. "Dealings!" Jackson's jaw tightened. His conscience was finally winning out over his fear. A soft knock interrupted them. Noah stood in the doorway, pajama-clad and sleepy-eyed. "Mama? Uncle Jack? I had a dream about Daddy." Emily opened her arms and Noah climbed into her lap, though he was getting almost too big for it. Jackson quickly covered the police report with other papers. "Want to talk about it, partner?" Jackson asked gently. Noah nodded against Emily's shoulder. He was in his truck, but he wasn't sad this time. He said... The boy frowned, concentrating. He said sometimes the truth takes a long time to find its way home, like that lost calf we found yesterday. Emily's eyes met Jackson's over Noah's. "Ed, even after death, Thomas was finding ways to speak." "Your daddy was a good man," Jackson said quietly. "Got caught in a bad situation, but he loved you something fierce. Is that why Grandfather gets so angry when people talk about him?" Noah asked. "Because of the truth." Emily kissed his head, buying time to steady her voice. "Yes, sweetheart. Some people get angry when the truth comes out, but that's not our problem to fix." "That's right," Jackson agreed. "Our job is just to be honest. Like when you're working with sugar, horses always know if you're being truthful with them." Noah sat up straighter, his father's eyes serious in his young face. "I remember something else from that night. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but I heard Daddy on the phone with Grandfather. He said he had papers, proof of something bad. He was going to drive them to Austin." Emily's heart stopped. "Papers? Noah, are you sure?" He had a blue folder, said it was his insurance, but he never came home. Jackson was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. Martha's diary mentioned a blue folder too. Said Richard tore the ranch apart looking for it next day. Thomas must have hidden it somewhere, Emily breathed. Somewhere he thought was safe. The ranch hand's cabin, Jackson said suddenly. Thomas used to hide there when Richard was on a tear. Had a loose floorboard he'd stash things under. He stood, decision made. I'll take some men out at first light. If that folder's there, then we'll have real proof, Emily finished. Not just circumstantial evidence, but Daddy used to call it his shield, Noah interrupted, yawning. Said as long as he had it, we'd be safe from the wolves. Emily hugged him closer, her eyes burning. Even at the end, Thomas had tried to protect them, had died trying to break free of his father's control. Think you can get back to sleep, son? Jackson asked softly. When Noah nodded, he added, Want me to check under your bed for wolves first? Noah's smile was pure Thomas. No need. We've got better protection now. After Emily tucked Noah back into bed, she returned to find Jackson staring at the police. Report, his expression unreadable. If we find that folder, she said quietly, there's no going back. Jackson took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. Wait, I see it. We crossed that line the moment you and Noah came down my road. His voice roughened. Some fights choose you, and some truths won't stay buried, no matter how deep folks try to hide them. Through the study window, dawn was breaking. Over the ranch, another day of battles ahead, but now they had something even more powerful than evidence. Hope. The voice recording crackled through Jackson's truck speakers. Richard Blackwood's rage, preserved in digital clarity. Cal had caught it all on his phone from his hiding spot in the ranch hand's cabin, where he'd been waiting just in case the Blackwoods made exactly this move. That folder belongs to me, Richard's voice boomed. You're trespassing on Blackwood land. This is Cole property. Jackson's recorded voice remained steady. Has been since before your daddy was born. And we found exactly what we were looking for. Emily gripped the steering wheel of her Corolla, parked behind a stand of oak trees, where Jackson had insisted she wait with Noah. They could see the confrontation unfolding by the old cabin, Jackson standing his ground, the blue folder visible in his hand, while Richard and two unfamiliar men blocked his path to his truck. Call the sheriff, Emily whispered to Martha Chen, who sat beside her monitoring the police scanner. Noah huddled in the back seat, his small hand clutching Sugar's old lead rope like a talisman. Already did, Martha replied grimly. But Jenkins isn't responding. Convenient that the recording continued, capturing the escalating confrontation in real time. That folder contains private family business, Richard snarled. Murder's not family business, Jackson's voice cut like steel. Neither is fraud. Your boy figured that out, didn't he? That's why you had his brake lines cut. A sharp crack echoed. Through the speakers, the sound of a fist meeting flesh. Emily's heart stopped as she watched Jackson stagger back, blood marking his shirt. Uncle Jack, Noah cried out, and Emily had to grab his arm to keep him from bolting from the car. Stay here, she ordered, her voice shaking. Martha, don't let him out no matter what. Before Martha could protest, Emily was moving, sliding through the trees toward the cabin. She'd lived too long in fear of Richard Blackwood, watched too many people hurt by his rage. You think you can hide behind coal money? Richard was saying, as she approached. I own this county. One phone call and what? Emily's voice rang out. All heads turned as she emerged from the trees. You'll add another murder to your conscience? Another hunting accident to explain? Emily, Jackson's voice held warning and fear. His eye was swelling, but he still gripped the blue folder. Get back to Noah. Listen to him, girl, Richard sneered, before I have to teach you another lesson about respect. Emily's laugh held no humor. Respect? You want to talk about respect? She moved closer, feeling strangely calm. I respected your son, loved him, watched him try to earn your approval until it killed him. But he left us a gift, didn't he? Insurance, he called. It proof of everything you've done. You don't know what you're talking about. Richard's face purpled, but she saw the fear beneath his rage. The SEC wire transfers, she continued, the falsified environmental reports, Officer Morris's real cause of death. Thomas documented it all. Each word hit like a hammer. He knew you'd kill him for it. But he did it anyway, for Noah, for me, for everyone you've ever hurt. Richard lunged forward, but Jackson was faster. The rancher's fist caught Richard square in the jaw, dropping him hard. "That's assault!" one of Richard's men shouted, reaching into his jacket. "That's self-defense," a new voice rang out. Judge Martinez emerged from behind the cabin, phone held high. "And I've got it all on video, along with some interesting audio from Mr. Cole's security system." More figures appeared, Cal and two other ranch hands, their own phones recording. Martha Chen stepped out of the trees, Noah safely behind her, the police scanner crackling with activity. "I just got off the phone with the Texas Rangers," Martinez continued. "They're very interested in reviewing all this evidence, particularly since it involves the death of a state officer." Richard struggled to his feet, spitting blood. "You can't prove—" "Yes, we can." Jackson held up the blue folder. "Thomas knew you'd search his truck. That's why he hid the original documents here. But he was smart. He made copies, sent them to people he trusted, people who were just waiting for the right moment to come forward." Sirens wailed in the distance, but not local police. The distinctive sound of state trooper vehicles approached. "It's over, Richard," Emily said quietly. "Thomas made sure of that." Richard's face contorted. With a roar, he charged toward Emily, hands outstretched. But before Jackson could move, another figure darted forward. Noah swung Sugar's lead rope with all his strength, just as Jackson had taught him. The heavy rope handle caught Richard's knee, sending him crashing down once more. "Don't touch my—" "Mama," Noah said, his voice shaking but determined. "Not ever again." Emily grabbed her son, pulling him close as the Texas Rangers' vehicles appeared on the ranch road. Jackson moved to stand before them both, the blue folder held tight in his bloodied hand. "Like father, like son," he said softly, watching Richard's empire crumble. "Thomas would be proud." Through her tears, Emily saw justice approaching at last, its lights flashing red and blue in the Texas dawn. The town hall meeting minutes would later record it as an unprecedented gathering of concerned citizens. But to Emily, watching from her seat beside Jackson, it felt more like a reckoning. The old building's pews were packed, every face bearing witness as decades of silence crumbled under the weight of shared truth. "Let the record show," Mayor Davis intoned, his usual bluster replaced by grim determination, "that this emergency session was called to address the formal complaints against Richard and Margaret Blackwood following their arrest by Texas Rangers." Jackson's hand found Emily's, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. The bruise around his eye had darkened to purple, but he wore it like a badge of honor. Noah sat on his other side, shoulder to shoulder with Tommy Blackwood, the boys united. In their relief that some burdens were too heavy for children to carry, Martha Chen stood first, her ledger clutched tight. "I've kept records," she began, voice trembling but strong. "Every threat, every accident, every business suddenly sold after refusing to bow to Blackwood pressure. 27 years of watching, writing it all down, waiting for someone brave enough to stand up first." More voices joined hers, a flood of testimony breaking through the dam of fear. Mr. Peterson, his dish towel twisted in guilty hands, confessing how he'd helped cover up the diner incident. Sheriff Jenkins, badge already surrendered, admitting to years of selective enforcement. Even Margaret's social circle, those perfectly coiffed ladies who'd once shunned Emily, now competing to expose the family's elaborate web of threats and payoffs. "My Thomas tried to stop it," Emily said when her turn came, standing tall despite her tears. "He died protecting the evidence that would expose their crimes. But he didn't die in vain, because he trusted the truth would find its way home." And it did, Judge Martinez added from her place near the podium. "The SEC has frozen the Blackwood accounts. The Texas Rangers are expanding their investigation into Officer Morris's death. And the state's attorney has enough evidence to ensure Richard Blackwood won't harm anyone else for a very long time." A muscle worked in Jackson's jaw as he stood, commanding the room's attention without raising his voice. This town was built by people who understood that real strength comes from standing together. My grandfather used to say that fear might build empires, but truth sustains communities. He surveyed the gathered faces. Today, we choose which kind of town we want to be. Mrs. Martinez, the school secretary who'd first helped Emily, rose shakily to her feet. I move that we establish a community fund using seized Blackwood assets to help their victims rebuild, to show that this town takes care of its own the right way. Seconded, called out voices from every corner. Tommy Blackwood suddenly spoke up from beside Noah, his young voice clear in the quiet. What about me? Where will I go? Emily's heart clenched at the fear in his voice. She knelt before the boy, who'd once parroted his grandfather's cruelty, seeing now only a child, desperate for love. You'll stay right here, she said firmly, with people who'll show you a different way to be strong. She met Margaret's sister's eyes across the room, saw the woman's grateful nod. Someone else choosing to break the cycle. The mayor's gavel struck, making it official. Emily felt the impact ripple through the room like a cleansing wave. Outside, through the town hall's high windows, she could see the Texas sun painting the sky in shades of hope. "Mama," Noah whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Can we show Tommy the new foal? Sugar's baby?" Jackson smiled, the expression softening. His bruised face. "Think that's a fine idea, son. Sometimes the best way forward is giving someone else a fresh start." As the meeting continued around them, Emily watched the two boys slip out to the parking lot, their shadows merging in the late afternoon light. The town hall minutes would record the official decisions, the property redistributions, the new accountability measures put in place, but they wouldn't capture this moment, the quiet healing beginning in the spaces between official declarations. The way Tommy's shoulders relaxed as Noah showed him how to hold his hand flat for Sugar's baby to sniff. The gentle way Jackson guided both boys, teaching them that true strength grew best in open hearts. Martha Chen appeared at Emily's side, pressing a copy of her ledger into her hands. "For Noah," she said softly, "so he'll know the whole story someday, how his daddy's courage gave us all a second chance." Emily hugged the older woman, feeling the years of shared vigilance between them. Through the window, she watched her son, teaching Tommy to be gentle with the foal, Jackson's steady presence guarding them both. Some wounds would take time to heal. Some trusts would need careful rebuilding. But here, in this moment, Emily felt the first real stirrings of peace. Not just for herself and Noah, but for an entire community learning to stand together in the light of truth. The bank records, spread across Judge Martinez's conference table, told a story of corruption so deep it made Emily's hands shake. Each transaction, each offshore account, each falsified report represented another life damaged by the Blackwood's greed. Thomas's meticulous documentation had opened a door that couldn't be closed. 23 properties seized through fraudulent means, Agent Sarah Reeves from the Texas Rangers read from her tablet. 15 businesses forced into bankruptcy after refusing partnerships. And that's just the financial crimes. She looked up, her eyes hard. "The evidence your husband gathered about Officer Morris's murder is what will put Richard Blackwood away for life." Jackson stood at the window, his reflection ghosting against the Austin skyline. Thomas knew the risks. That's why he created the dead man's switch, documents automatically sent to multiple authorities if he didn't check in every week. "He thought it would protect us," Emily said softly. "But Richard moved faster than the fail-safes." Agent Reeves nodded grimly. "The brake line tampering was professional work. We've identified the mechanic responsible. He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity." Emily's fingers found the locket at her throat. Thomas's picture inside, now a reminder of justice rather than loss. What about Margaret cooperating? Fully, Martinez interjected, shuffling through more papers. Says she's been keeping her own records for years. Insurance, in case Richard ever turned on her. Between her testimony and the evidence from Thomas's folder, we're uncovering corruption going back 3 generations. A knock at the door revealed Martha Chen, carrying a fresh stack of statements. More victims coming forward, she reported. Not just from our town. 3 counties worth of people finally breaking their silence. Jackson moved to Emily's side, his presence steady as always. The Blackwood Empire's falling, he said quietly. But the cost was too high, Emily finished, thinking of Thomas, of Officer Morris, of all the lives broken by Richard's rage and greed. But their sacrifices won't be forgotten. Agent Reeves's phone buzzed. Her expression shifted as she read the message. Richard's attorney just called. He wants to make a deal. No deals, Emily said firmly, surprising herself with her strength. Thomas died for the truth. We owe him, and everyone else, justice. Martinez smiled wolfishly. My thoughts exactly. Besides, with what we've uncovered about environmental violations alone, the federal prosecutors are circling like hawks. Richard's only choice now is how many charges he faces. A commotion outside the conference room drew their attention. Through the glass walls, they saw Margaret Blackwood being led in by her attorney. Her perfect composure had cracked, showing the weary woman beneath the polished facade. I'd like to speak with Emily, she said as they entered. Alone, Jackson tensed, but Emily squeezed his hand. It's all right, she murmured. The others filed out, though Jackson's reluctance was clear. In every line of his body, alone with her former mother-in-law, Emily waited. Margaret looked older, her carefully maintained appearance showing signs of strain. I love Thomas, Margaret said finally, in my own way. But Richard, he had this power, this way of making you believe that fear was the same as respect. She met Emily's eyes. I should have protected my son. Should have protected you and Noah, but you didn't. Emily said quietly. You chose silence. Yes. Margaret's shoulders slumped, and I'll live with that choice forever. But I can do something. Now. She reached into her designer bag, removing a small leather diary. I kept track of everything. Every conversation, every threat, every crime Richard committed, thinking I was too afraid to notice. Emily took the diary, its pages heavy with 2 decades of witnessed cruelty. Why now? Because I saw Noah with Tommy at the town hall meeting. Margaret's voice caught. Saw how you and Jackson were helping both boys heal, teaching them a different way. She wiped a tear. I want to help make things right. Not just for Thomas, but for every child who grew up thinking fear was normal. Outside the conference room, Emily could see Jackson watching protectively. Behind him, Agent Reeves was on her phone, likely receiving more evidence of the Blackwoods and crumbling empire. Martha Chen sat with Judge Martinez, their heads bent over more victim statements. It won't bring Thomas back, Emily said, touching her locket, or Officer Morris, or heal all the harm Richard's done. No, Margaret agreed, but maybe it can help build something new, something better. She stood, straightening her shoulders. I'm ready to testify about everything, including the night Thomas died. Emily watched her former mother-in-law walk out, head held high for the first time in years. The diary's weight in her hands felt like another piece of truth finding its way home. Jackson slipped back into the room, concern etched on his features. You okay? Yes, Emily said, surprising herself by meaning it. I think I finally am. She gestured to the mountain of evidence surrounding them. All these secrets, all this pain, it's finally seeing the light. Through the windows, the Texas sun painted Austin in shades of gold. Somewhere north, Noah was safe at the ranch with Sarah, probably showing Tommy more of Sugar's gentle ways. The truth had cost them dearly, but its price had bought something precious, freedom from fear and the chance to build something new from the ashes of secrets too long buried. The court verdict arrived on a crystal-clear Texas morning, its official seal catching the sunlight streaming through Jackson's study window. Emily read the words aloud, each sentence another brick falling from the wall of fear that had surrounded their lives for so long. The defendant, Richard Blackwood, is hereby found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, witness tampering. Her voice steadied as she continued. Sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Jackson stood behind her chair, one hand resting on her shoulder. Through the window they could see Noah and Tommy in the paddock, teaching Sugars. Full to accept a halter, the boys' laughter drifted up, free and unburdened. Margaret's testimony was the final nail. Judge Martinez said from her seat by the fireplace. Between her evidence and Thomas's documentation, the jury took less than 3 hours to decide. The civil suits are settled too, Martha Chen added, reviewing another document. The Blackwood assets will be liquidated with restitution paid. To all victims, the community foundation we established will oversee the distribution. Emily touched the fresh ink, remembering Thomas's words about truth finding its way home. What about the other investigations? Dominoes are falling across 3 states, Martinez confirmed. Corporate fraud, environmental violations, decades of corruption. The federal prosecutors are having a field day. Sheriff Jenkins and his conspirators have all taken plea deals. Even that mechanic who tampered with Thomas's brakes is facing justice. The phone on Jackson's desk rang. Sarah from the barn, her voice excited. Y'all might want to come down here. Sugar's foal just took his first steps without stumbling. The boys are over the moon. Jackson smiled, the expression lighting his weathered face. We'll be right down. He helped Emily to her feet, his touch gentle despite his calloused hands. Want to go see what our boys are up to? Our boys. The phrase settled in Emily's heart like a warm blanket. These past months had transformed Tommy from a bitter child parroting his grandfather's cruelty into a boy learning to trust again. His aunt, Margaret's sister, had welcomed him into her family, with plenty of time at the Double Cross Ranch to heal under Jackson and Emily's guidance. The property transfers will be finalized next week, Martinez said, gathering her papers. The Blackwood estate will be divided exactly as Thomas specified in his contingency documents. Half to the victims' fund, half to Noah's trust. With Emily as sole trustee, Martha added with satisfaction. No more Blackwood control ever again. They made their way down to the barn, the afternoon sun painting long shadows across the ranch yard. The verdict papers in Emily's hand felt lighter now, their weight distributed among all the people who had finally stood together against generations of abuse. At the paddock fence, Noah's face lit up. Mama, Uncle Jack, look what we taught Storm to do. They'd named Sugar's foal Storm for the thunderheads that had rolled in the night he was born. The same night Emily and Jackson had exchanged their simple vows, turning a marriage of protection into one of love. Tommy held the lead rope with careful confidence, demonstrating the training techniques Jackson had taught them. He's learning so fast, he said proudly. Just like Sugar learned to trust again after everything. Emily felt Jackson's arm slip around her waist as they watched the boys work with the colt. The verdict papers crinkled in her hand, and she realized she was finally ready to let them go. Not to forget, but to focus on the future they were building. Judge Martinez, she called softly, could you make sure these get filed with Thomas's other documentation for the historical record? The judge nodded, understanding in her eyes. They'll tell the story for generations, how one man's courage sparked a change, how a community finally found its voice, and how love turned out to be stronger than fear, Martha added, watching Tommy laugh as Storm nuzzled his pockets for treats. Jackson pressed a kiss to Emily's temple. Your Thomas would be proud of all this, of Noah, of you, of us. Emily corrected gently. He'd be proud of everything we built from the ashes of what Richard destroyed. She touched her locket, then unclasped it, letting it rest in her palm. I think it's time to put this away, not to forget, but to make room for new memories, Jackson finished. He understood, as he always did, the weight and the freedom of letting go. The boys called them over to demonstrate Storm's progress, their faces shining with accomplishment. Emily tucked the locket into her pocket and took Jackson's hand, stepping forward into the life they'd fought so hard to create. Behind them, the verdict papers disappeared into Martinez's briefcase, their purpose served. Justice had been done. Now it was time to live. The marriage license lay on the dresser, no longer just a shield against the Blackwoods, but a testament to something deeper. Emily touched the embossed paper as she finished pinning up her hair, remembering that first, hurried ceremony in Judge Martinez's office. Today was different. Today was for love. The guest house that had once been their sanctuary was now Tommy's weekend home, while the main ranch house had become the heart of their blended family. Through her window, Emily could see the ranch hands stringing lights between the old oak trees, transforming the yard into a wonderland for tonight's celebration. "Mama?" Noah stood in the doorway, resplendent in his new suit. At 9, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that reminded her of both his fathers, Thomas's gentle heart and Jackson's steady strength. "Uncle Jack's nervous. He keeps adjusting his tie and asking if his boots are shined enough." Emily smiled, remembering how that same man had stood unflinching before Richard Blackwood's rage. "Why don't you go help him, sweetheart? You know how to tie a proper Windsor knot. Now!" As Noah hurried off, Martha Chen appeared with an armful of wildflowers. "The boys picked these themselves," she said, arranging them in Emily's hair. "Tommy insisted on blue cornflowers, said they match your eyes. How is Tommy doing?" Emily asked softly. The boy spent most weekends at the ranch now, healing alongside his aunt's family. "Better every day. Having Noah for a brother has changed him completely." Martha's fingers stilled in Emily's hair. "You and Jackson, you've given both boys something precious, a chance to grow up without fear." A knock at the door revealed Sarah, Jackson's head trainer, holding a small wooden box. "Found this in Sugar's old stall," she said, eyes twinkling. "Think someone left it there on purpose." Inside the box lay a delicate silver bracelet, its charm a perfect miniature of the Double Cross Ranch brand. A note in Jackson's strong hand read, "For the woman who turned my house into a home, all my love, Jay." Emily's eyes misted as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Through the window, she could see Judge Martinez arriving, not in her judicial robes this time, but in a flowing summer dress. The judge who had helped them find justice would today officiate their celebration of love. "Mrs. Cole," Tommy's voice came from the doorway. He still tested the name sometimes, like trying on something precious and fragile. "Noah says it's almost time, and Uncle Jack is wearing a groove in the barn floor." Emily knelt before him, straightening his tie. "How do I look?" "Like a queen," he said seriously. "Like someone who isn't afraid of anything anymore." The simple observation brought fresh tears. "That's because of you too, you know. You and Noah, showing us all how to be brave in new ways." The boy's smile, so different from the defensive sneer he'd worn in those dark days, lit up his whole face. "Sugar's foal is all dressed up too. Noah and I braided his mane with ribbons." Martha shooed him out to take his place. "Time to go, honey. Your men are waiting." The setting sun painted the ranch in shades of gold as Emily made her way to the ceremony space. The old oak trees sparkled with lights, their branches creating a natural cathedral. Ranch hands and townspeople filled the seats, not just witnesses now, but family forged in shared triumph over darkness. She saw Jackson before he saw her. He stood tall in his dark suit, silver touching his temples, his face soft with wonder as Noah straightened his tie one last time. Tommy stood nearby, holding a small pillow with their rings, simple gold bands that would now represent choice rather than necessity. Then Jackson turned, and the look in his eyes made her heart stop. This was no convenient protector, no tactical alliance. This was the man who had taught her son to gentle horses and her heart to trust again, who had faced down evil with quiet strength and helped a whole community find its courage. As she reached him, Jackson took her hands in his calloused ones. "You're stunning," he whispered. "You're shaking," she whispered back. "With joy," he replied simply. Noah and Tommy flanked them like honor guards as Judge Martinez began the ceremony. The boys exchanged proud looks, partners in creating this moment. Emily felt tears spill as Jackson's voice roughened during his vows, promising to love and protect not just her, but both boys, for all his days. The marriage license would record the legal facts, names, dates, signatures. But it couldn't capture this. The way healing felt like sunrise, how love could grow in the ashes of fear, how family could be born from choice as surely as blood. When Jackson kissed her, she tasted joy and promise and forever. They gathered. Loved ones cheered, and two young boys hugged them tight, and somewhere in the distance a foal nickered to its mother. They were home, all of them, at last. The family portrait caught the last golden light of day. 4 figures gathered on the ranch house porch steps. Emily studied the photograph in its simple wooden frame, marveling at how much had changed in the year since they'd fled down that dusty road. Noah sat on the top step, his arm around Tommy's shoulders, both boys grinning with the unguarded joy of children who'd forgotten to be afraid. Jackson stood behind Emily, his hands resting gently on her shoulders, his smile reaching all the way to his eyes. And Emily herself, she hardly recognized the woman in the photo with her straight spine and peaceful expression. The woman who had learned to live without fear. Found a place for it, Jackson said, entering his study with a hammer and nail. He'd cleared a space on the wall among the old Cole family photos, right next to the ranch's original deed. You sure? Emily asked softly. That's the heritage wall. Exactly. He hung the portrait with careful precision. Heritage isn't just about the past. It's about what we choose to build for the future. Through the window, they could hear the boys in the paddock, their voices carrying across the evening air. They were teaching Storm new tricks, the yearling colt as gentle as his mother Sugar, their laughter mixed with the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of wind through late summer leaves. Letter came from Margaret, Emily said, touching the frame. She's doing well in the rehabilitation program, teaching other women about recognizing abuse, breaking the cycle. She paused. She asked if the boys might visit at Christmas. With supervision, of course. Jackson nodded, understanding. The weight of the request. What do you think? I think, Emily chose her words carefully, I think healing happens in circles, not straight lines. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who learn to forgive without forgetting. He drew her close, and she leaned into his strength, not because she needed it now, but because she chose it. Through the study window, they watched Noah demonstrate a new training technique to Tommy, his movements sure and confident. Thomas would be proud, Jackson said quietly, of all of us. Emily touched her wedding ring, thinking of another ring, long since put away with her locket in a box of memories. He helped us find our way here. Him and your grandfather both, men who chose to stand up, to leave breadcrumbs of truth for others to follow. The sound of hooves on gravel announced Sarah's arrival for the evening feeding. The ranch hands would be gathering in the bunkhouse, soon sharing tales and coffee bound together by more than just work now. The whole community had been transformed by the truth they'd uncovered together. Boys, Emily called, time to wash up for dinner. Their footsteps thundered up the porch steps, bringing the smell of horses and hay and youth. Noah's eyes were bright with excitement. Storm did it, Mama! The new command! First try! He hugged her impulsively. Uncle Jack, Dad, can we show you after dinner? The title was still new, chosen rather than demanded. Jackson's smile held all the love in the world. Wouldn't miss it for anything, son. Tommy hung back slightly until Emily opened her arms. He came to her then, this boy who had found his way home to a different kind of family. Aunt Claire says I can stay the whole week this time, he said hopefully. Since school's out? Well then, Emily smiled, we better make sure your room's ready. Noah, why don't you help your brother get settled? The boys raced off, their footsteps echoing through the house that had once felt too big for Jackson. Alone. Now it was full of life and love and second chances. Emily looked at the family portrait one last time before heading to the kitchen. The woman in the photo smiled back, at peace with her past and in love with her future. Outside, the Texas sun painted the ranch in shades of promise, while inside, the sounds of family filled every corner with joy. They had all come full circle, from broken to healing, from afraid to strong, from alone to together. And in that completion, they had found something rare and precious, a happy ending that was really just a new beginning.